everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about this unit. So this unit, we're going to be talking about World War One. At the time, it was called the Great War, and we're going to go through the Great War through the Great Depression. Not a lot of it's great, but the stories are fantastic. Let's go ahead and get started. So this unit, we're going to focus on America's involvement in World War One up through the 1920s and then into the Great Depression, the largest economic collapse in American history. Let's start with talking about World War One, which at the time is just referred to as the Great War. It's not going to be referred to as World War One until World War Two. It would be kind of crazy to call it World War One during World War One, because then it just sounds like you're expecting another world war. So, if you had me for world history, we went through this in depth on what started World War I in 1914. It actually had nothing to do with America. So let me walk you through here, kind of as a refresher on what happened that led to World War I starting in 1914. So, in Europe, for a long time, they had been doing imperialism, being aggressive around the world, not necessarily with each other, but they had all gotten very wealthy and owned a lot of stuff around the world. Just as we had talked about in the Spanish-American War, if you happen to go to war with a country that owns stuff, you get all their stuff from them. So there is an incentive for these imperialistic countries to actually go to war with each other, because if they defeat the other one, they get all their stuff around the world and they get richer. To make sure this doesn't happen, countries in Europe committed to this idea of militarism. Militarism is the idea that everybody gets a huge army so that nobody will attack them. All right, and you focus very heavily on this massive buildup of your military. The problem with militarism is that when you spend a ton of money building a massive military, when you get something shiny that goes boom, you really want to use it. So countries, after they created these huge militaries to prevent war, are now feeling pretty invincible because their military is so big, and they spent so much money on this and so much time and effort, they kind of want to test it out. So typically militarism, while trying to prevent war, usually is more likely to cause wars. They also had this whole string of secret alliances in the middle of Europe at the time. So basically somebody had your back if you got attacked, but nobody else knew that you had this arrangement. What this does is this makes Europe at the time referred to as a powder keg. All right, so this is what Europe looked like at the start of World War One. If you want to pause me and read all the stuff there on the left side of the screen on how World War One happened, feel free. But if you had me in world history, we spent an extended amount of time talking about this. But once again, I'll give you the rundown. This dude, Archduke Franz Ferdinand from Austria, gets assassinated. All right, he's visiting Bosnia, a country they own, and he is assassinated by a terrorist group from Serbia. Due to a series of secret alliances, countries, like a domino effect, just started declaring war on each other, and almost overnight, Europe, which had no beef with each other just prior to this, they're also war hungry because of militarism. They all declare war on each other, and it gets crazy brutal, in large part because there's a new war machine out called the machine gun. It's not a handheld thing like we would think of today, but these machine guns basically make it impossible to charge across an open field without just getting absolutely slaughtered. And all the sides had it. They basically divide into different groups. You got England, France, and Russia are the allies. And Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy are the central powers. Neither side's the good guy or bad guy. It's all just kind of dumb. They all have these machine guns. So it basically forces everybody to go to trench warfare, where you basically just have to dig a hole in the ground and not get shot with a machine gun. So World War One just turns into trench warfare in Europe, where it's a stalemate where neither side can actively advance on the other side without giving up their defenses. So it just got really dumb, really bad. And anybody that tried to charge across like the middle of these battlefields here, called no man's land, at the other trenches, would just be absolutely mowed down. Tons of people are dying in World War One. Again, called Great War. There's all types of, they use poison mustard gas. Airplanes start becoming more advanced for scouting. The machine guns. Tanks will come out at the end of World War One. That will we'll talk about that some tomorrow. That is going to effectively counteract the machine guns, but it's going to be years before that's developed. So Europe is in an absolute vicious war with each other, and America is trying to stay out of it. So the question here is, explain how militarism, while usually presented as a way for countries to prevent war, often actually causes countries to be more likely to go to war. So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. All right, so America, our immediate response here is, nah, staying out of that. Woodrow Wilson is the president at the time. If you remember, due to the Bull Moose Party and splitting the votes with the Republicans, Woodrow Wilson got elected president in 1912. First Democrat since before the Civil War that had been elected president. So nobody wants to go to war because America looks at this and we're like, this is really, really dumb. So Wilson says, we're not getting involved in this dumb thing that's happening here in Europe. So the war in Europe starts in 1914. All right. In 1916, Woodrow Wilson runs for president for re-election, and his campaign slogan was that we are staying out of this war. The war is stupid. All right. Because he had actively kept America out of this war, he's going to win re-election in 1916. The American people liked the fact that America wasn't getting involved in this war. He does, however, interesting enough, has the motto of preparedness. He's like, look, we're definitely staying out of this war, everybody. But just in case, we need to make sure that we have a large military to be prepared in case we get, unavoidably pulled into this war. As we've already talked about, this is kind of going into the concept of militarism. When we start building up a big military, because we didn't really have a huge military, we had a big navy, but we didn't have a huge military, a lot of troops on the ground. Once we started building that up in the United States, the larger our military get, the less, opposed to getting involved in the war that we get. But so 1916, 2 years after this war is going on in Europe, and it's brutal, that we decide we are going to stay out of this war. All right. In 1917, a year after this, we joined the war. So how in the world do we go from, in 1916, the American people re-elected Woodrow Wilson for keeping us out of this war, to 1917, the American people we're all in, all right? And we're going to jump into this war heavily in 1917. What happens? Well, here's what's going to happen. So you got to kind of understand what's happening in the war in Europe to understand how America gets suckered into this. So here in the center of the map, the orange companies, the German Empire, Austrian-Hungarian Empire, Italy. So Italy's confusing here. I just said earlier that Italy is part of the Central Powers. Italy switches sides halfway through this war. So the maps aren't always accurate depending on what part of the war they're showing you a map from. So Italy was on the side of Germany and Austria, really until America gets involved, and then Italy switches sides. So just go with me on that. Again, talked about it in world history. So Germany, all right, if you notice, they don't have a lot of coastline, all right? England, however, has a massive navy, all right? And this is a picture of England's navy during World War One. And what they're able to do is they're able to go through and they're able to blockade Germany. So Germany can't get any supplies in because they are surrounded by countries that either don't have enough supplies to give them, like Austria-Hungary, or enemy countries, so they can't get supplies in. So this is what England does, is they take their navy and they put a blockade on Germany, slowly starving Germany to death. Now, Germany doesn't have a big navy, but what they do create for the first time are these things called U-boats. They're just like little mini submarines that look like this. So these U-boats, what they would do is they would go underneath the blockade. They would float over to England and then randomly start attacking stuff on the coast of England. They only have like 2 torpedoes. They have a little periscope out the top. There's really no technology involved. They don't have a windshield. So they're driving blind a lot of times. And so all they know is they get over to England and then they're just going to blow up the first thing that they see. All right. What this is going to effectively do is bring England's Navy, who needs to protect England, away from Germany, back to England, lifting the blockade. Germany can now trade and get supplies in. America, being super neutral here, trying not to pick a side between the Central Powers or the Allies, because we think they're both being stupid here, we're trading with both of them. Germany will also sink any ships that they see when they're out in the ocean with these U-boats. And they can't really tell very well what they're sinking. They know they don't have any ships out there, so they're not worried about sinking their own ships. They pretty much sink anything that they see because their thought process is, if we see a ship, we're going to sink a ship. The only way that could be a really bad issue is if they accidentally sank an American ship. Germany wants to keep America out of this war. Nobody wants America to join the war against them. So Germany, knowing that they could accidentally sink an American ship, basically tells America in newspaper printouts, hey, America, Europe's a great place to visit. Right now is not a great time. If you come over here, we're blowing things up. So please don't come over here. Once the war's over and Germany wins, a fantastic place to visit. And we'd love to have tourists. Please do not come over here. We don't want to accidentally sink you. Because Germany was adamantly aware they didn't want to accidentally infuriate America to joining the war. This makes sense. But Americans sometimes, we like to be dumb. A group of Americans at the time, and this is 128 to be exact, decided this would be a fantastic time to take a cruise in the middle of a war zone. So 128 Americans travel to England, all right, and they're going to get on a cruise ship. This is the cruise ship that they're going to get on. This is not a military ship. This is the Lusitania. If you're like, oh, I really thought he was going to say that was the Titanic, because that's what I think the Titanic looks like, you would be correct. Because the Titanic, while it had sunk about 10 years before this, this was their sister ship. They made 2 ships that look identical. The Titanic, that was unsinkable, hit an iceberg, sank. And this one, the Lusitania. So the Lusitania is a cruise ship in England. So 128 Americans and thousands of British people decided they're going to take a cruise during a war in a war zone, and they're going to take a cruise from Great Britain down to France, right? Because they're both on the same side here. Because why people would do this, I don't know. So what makes it weird is that as the Lusitania, which is the Lusitania, fully civilian ship, as they're going to leave Great Britain, they are asked to have Great Britain's like, oh, you're going down to France? Well, can you take these machine guns down to the people in France? We need you to do that. The Lusitania is like, sure, just stow it on the bottom of the ship. Technically, since the Lusitania is carrying weapons of war, even if they're in boxes in the bottom and the people on the ship have no idea that they're actually carrying weapons, that now makes it a military vessel. As the cruise ship is leaving Great Britain going to France, a U-boat sees the Lusitania. Now, it has no idea what it is. It is a little periscope. You just see a ship off in the distance. The U-boat shoots and sinks the Lusitania. All right? The reason so many people died on the Titanic when it sank is there wasn't enough rowboats. Same situation on the Lusitania. It slowly sinks. Tons of people die because there's not enough rowboats, all right? And it is worldwide news that Germany sank the Lusitania, all right? Germany is pretty upset about this, all right? Because 128 Americans got killed, and America is mad at Germany. This starts getting America turning against Germany. And Germany's like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And America's like, Germany, how dare you do that? You apologize right now. And Germany's like, absolutely, we are sorry. And then America says, hey, Germany, we're not going to tell you again. You're going to stop using these dang U-boats or we're going to get involved. And Germany says, all right, America, you're right. We won't use the U-boats anymore. All right? Because nobody wants, these countries have been fighting each other. They're tuckered out. They're tired. The last thing they want is a fresh, powerful country coming in and getting involved. So Germany's like, fine, we won't use the U-boats anymore. But what happens is as soon as Germany stops using those U-boats, England blockades Germany again. This is a problem. Because now Germany is starving to death. And the only way to lift the blockade is to use the U-boats. But if you use the U-boats, then America gets involved. So what do you do? So the Lusitania, and the question here is, explain how the sinking of the Lusitania wasn't technically illegal on Germany's part, and then explain why Germany still agreed to stop using U-boats, though technically they had not done anything wrong. The Lusitania was technically a military ship, technically. They didn't have cannons or anything on it, but the fact it was transporting military goods makes it not technically illegal. However, Germany still took responsibility for this and still agreed to stop using their U-boats because they knew America was angry that 128 Americans were killed. Thousands of other people got killed. But the only ones America cares about were the 128 Americans who decided to take a cruise in a war zone in World War I. But pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So, America is going to declare war on the Central Powers. How do we get there? I thought Germany agreed to stop using U-boats. Why'd we get angrier? Well, Germany started starving to death because once they stopped using their U-boats, they started getting blockaded by England again, and they realized they need to use their U-boats. But if they use their U-boats, this is going to have America hop back in this war, something they don't want. So what they decide to do is Germany finds a way that they can use their U-boats and keep America out of this war. Their thought process is, if America is involved in a war with somebody else, they won't care what's happening over here in Europe. So Germany tries to find people that are salty with America. They look at Mexico, looking at their history book, realize Mexico pretty irritated with America over history. If you remember the Mexican-American War, all right, Texas being stolen from them in Mexico's mind, that Germany wants Mexico to declare war on America. Now, they know that Mexico can't defeat America one-on-one, but what they do is they encourage Mexico. They type up a note. It's called the Zimmerman Note, all right? And they're going to send it over to Mexico, and it says, hey, Mexico. Now, prior to this, Mexico was just doing their own thing, oblivious to anything else going on. So they send this note to Germany. They send this note from Germany to Mexico, and it says, hey, Mexico, here's what I want you to do. I want you to declare war on America and fight them, all right? Now, we know you can't beat them, but once we, Germany, get done defeating everybody here in Europe, we're going to come help you out, help you beat America. Then all that land that got stolen from you, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, all that land, you get to have that back, all right? So, but we need you to declare war on them to keep them distracted. So Germany is very confident in this note when they type it, tap, 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 and they send it to Mexico. And then Germany immediately starts sinking ships again using U-boats. They actually sink a American cargo ship called the USS Sussex. Now, what's interesting is that note that had gotten sent never made it to Mexico. Mexico never got this note because England went, whoosh, got it. England captures it. And instead of just showing America this note immediately, they wait until exactly what happens. That German U-boats start unrestricted submarine warfare, something that America told them not to do, and Germany had agreed not to do it. Once German U-boats start using unrestricted submarine warfare again, England's like, uh-oh, look at this, America, and Germany's trying to get Mexico to declare war on you. At this point, even though America this is important here. One of the reasons America couldn't really pick a side anyway is there's a lot of German immigrants that have become American citizens in the United States, as well as English immigrants that have become American citizens. And which side are you going to pick? Well, once Germany starts trying to get Mexico to declare war on America, there is no more good feelings towards Germany in the United States, and Germany is the bad guy. And again, trying to get Mexico to declare war on America, and then starting to sink cargo ships like this picture here of the USS Sussex. That's all it takes, and America declares war on Germany. So, America is going to join the side of England and France. Italy is going to switch sides and join America. So we joined the side of Russia, but Russia, done with the war. They have the communist revolution. They become communist. Russia dips out with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. How you pronounce it? They back out of the war. So when America gets involved, Russia dips. And so America actually has more work to do now once America jumps in. So it's basically 4-on-1 at this point. England, France, Italy, and America versus Germany, because Austria-Hungary is on fire and the Ottoman Empire really can't do anything else. So when America gets involved, the first thing I do is deal with these dang U-boats. America uses this concept of the convoy system, which basically herds all of our cargo ships together and surround them with battleships. A U-boat's not dumb enough to attack a battleship. If a battleship can see a U-boat, that U-boat is sank. These U-boats like to take weak, undefended cargo ships or little torpedoes and stuff. U-boats don't want to mess with an actual battleship. So by basically herding all the ships together and surrounding them with a few battleships, it really eliminates the U-boat threat. America, since we're at war, we need a bunch of troops. We bring in the selective service, which is the draft. There's 24 million men available to be drafted in World War I, and we draft 3 million of them. So this is a actual photograph of men that have been drafted in World War I, lined up to go inside here. I'm sure they'll get signed in, all other stuff, given a uniform, given the stuff they need, and you can see them lined up here, and they're probably waiting for like a bus to take them off to boot camp. So the question here is, explain why Germany decided to start using unrestricted submarine warfare again, angering America, though they had promised that they wouldn't after the sinking of the Lusitania. So this is an intricate part of why America got pulled into World War I. So pause me, answer that completely. Moving on. So once America gets our fighting force, we send millions of men over to Europe to fight. And we're going to talk about kind of how that goes militarily, strategically in the next lesson. But they're called the American Expeditionary Force, which is kind of odd because America doesn't normally just give a name to our military as we ship them off to battle. But in World War I, we did. So this group of men is called the American Expeditionary Force. You got a picture of them here on a parade here during World War I. What's interesting is when the Americans show up in Europe. Now keep in mind, Europe has been fighting for 3 years. They are exhausted. And Americans show up and we're fresh. We are nicknamed the Doughboys. So the term for Americans in the military at the time was called the Doughboys when they show up in Europe. The reason this is, it's exactly, you're like, are they calling us fat? Actually, yes. They are calling us fat. But it's not in a negative connotation. See, Europe, everybody that could possibly be a farmer had been fighting for years. There's just not enough food in Europe. They're like starving to death. Everybody there weighs like 105 pounds. All the men fighting, they're malnourished. Americans show up, and a fit American soldier comes in weighing 145 pounds or so, 150 pounds, completely fit. There's no body fat by our standards on them, but since they look healthy, and you can hey, I can suck in and not see my spine. They're called doughboys because they look soft, but it is not in any way a negative. So it's like, oh, it's a doughboy. I wish I had meat on me. So the doughboys are reference that because they did look noticeably softer because they weren't starving to death like everybody else. So the head of the United States military that gets sent over is John J. Pershing. Woodrow Wilson basically lets John J. Pershing do whatever he wants when he goes over to Europe, but he gives him one rule. He says, Pershing, no matter what you do, do not divide up our military. The reason he tells Pershing not to divide up the military is the war had been going on for 3 years in Europe. Nothing has changed in Europe. It's a stalemate. The battle lines are the same as it has been since 1914. It's 1917 now. And America says, we're going to do things our way. Clearly, if you give the troops to Europe, they're just going to continue to do the same thing they've done and not gotten results for 3 years. America, we're going to show up and do things our way because nothing is worse than nothing that has happened in 3 years. So the big reason John J. Pershing is told not to allow any of the European countries to command their soldiers is because their commanders don't seem to be effective on either side because it's a stalemate. Everything is stuck. He wants new ideas, new focus going through, and doesn't want American soldiers under the command of ineffective European leaders. And that was the reason that Pershing is given that instruction. So the question here is, why was Pershing given the requirement not to divide up the United States military? So pause me, answer that completely. So let's talk here what's happening in the United States a little bit at this time. So while the men are going over to fight, a lot of things have to happen in the United States to be successful. First, there's this thing created called the War Productions Board. The War Productions Board basically decides which industries get the benefit of getting the raw materials that they need. Because the way of winning this war, the thing that America can do that other countries can't, is we're able to mass produce faster. So the War Productions Board decided what industry got what natural resources to maximize effectiveness in the war. So it was headed by this guy named Bernard Baruch, and this is a picture of him here. I got him labeled at the center of this picture. Another group that comes out under the United States is the National War Labor Board. The National War Labor Board had this motto of work or fight. So if you don't want to be drafted, you go to work. And a lot of this, I should clarify, is used again in World War II on even larger scales. So like the National War Labor Board says work or fight. You work in a factory that is making bombs or something like that, and you don't get drafted. But if you start being a bad worker, they're going to ship you off and let you go get drafted. Since food, as we've talked about, is such an issue, and America not only has to feed the Europeans or ourselves, we also have to feed the Europeans. There's a big push to encourage everybody to grow food at their homes. The Food Administration plant a victory garden, and America really buys into this. Another very important thing that is created at the time is the Committee on Public Information, the CPI, headed by a guy named George Creel. And that is George Creel there at the center here. This is designed to try to encourage the American public to think the war is going well. This is a pretty easy job in World War I because the war is going well. Tomorrow we're going to talk about why it is so important for the United States to think the war is going well because of how it's paid for with this thing called war bonds. But Bernard Baruch here, sorry, not Bernard Baruch, he's the War Industries Board. George Creel here is designed to try to make America look powerful and like everything is going great. It really is. We'll talk about it tomorrow. America shows up and wrecks shop. America wasn't sure it would go really smooth, so much so that we actually created the Boy Scouts at this time in case this war lasted multiple generations, that we already had a group. We can basically start training kids to be soldiers pretty quickly at this time. So the question here is, why do you think it was so important for the United States home front to focus so heavily on making sure everybody was involved in this war effort? All right, that's what I got for you guys today. See you guys tomorrow.